Welcome to RHI's Sociable City Interviews, where we meet with global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today, we are here with Elizabeth Dressen, the program director of the Night's Watch, a nightlife advocacy organization in San Francisco that focuses on addressing and preventing sexual violence at bars, nightclubs, and music festivals.
Well, hello there, Elizabeth. So great to meet you. I'm so excited to learn more about the work that you do. It seems very relevant and timely. But as we begin, why don't you give a little bit of background of who you are and a little bit of how you got to do what you're doing?
Sure. Thank you, Jim. It's great to meet you too. I'm really excited to speak at the conference this year. So the funny thing is that my background is not with, or my professional background, my day job is not with the Night's Watch. My background is in San Francisco's performing arts landscape. I've had the opportunity to work for the San Francisco Symphony, and I currently work at San Francisco's War Memorial and Performing Arts Center. I'm really grateful to be in this field because I feel like it gives me the opportunity to learn and experience San Francisco outside of its tech stereotype. And also, I've had the opportunity to bring stories to life across a variety of mediums, and storytelling is at the core. It's a core interest of mine, and it informs how I approach my personal and professional projects. And recreationally, I've always been a patron of nightlife, an enthusiastic patron of nightlife. Um, and my lifestyle is oriented around traveling to see and experience music. And through this, I developed an admiration for and an interest in some of the harm reduction services that I would see at some of these events because I feel like it gave me resources for some of the experiences that I had of sexual harassment and sexual violence when I would go out. And so I noticed an organization called Good Night Out Vancouver, and I soon started supporting their programs and leading some of their programs around the United States. I started taking their workshops, and they gave me the resources and infrastructure that I need to start my own program in San Francisco because I want to have that kind of infrastructure for where I live and for where I am going out the most.
When you talk, I mean, it seems like your main focus is around music and live music and everything. So when you look at some of these issues that you're addressing, like your colleague that I interviewed yesterday, Stacy, she has much more of a focus on the kind of the restaurant bar scene. Is your focus more looking at live music or large music festivals and the whole music economy that exists with uh, like larger events or festivals, or are you specifically looking at live music venues, like a nightclub an establishment that might have live music?
I would say that I am interested in focusing on nightlife adjacent spaces. So that would be bars, nightclubs, and music festivals.
Okay, so you cover the whole continuum is what your interest is.
Yeah, ideally.
Do, do you see different challenges with the different sectors, whether it be a bar or like a live music venue with musicians and stagehands and all of those people that are interacting for a festival? Is there a different culture or different approach that you have to take when you're dealing more specifically with musicians and their whole entourage versus bartenders and servers at a bar or restaurant?
Yeah, I think there's a couple differences here. So one thing, between a bar and a nightclub perhaps is that there might be different substances involved. Like certainly at a bar, for the most part, people might be consuming alcohol. At a nightclub, yes, there's alcohol service, but even though it's illegal, it is not uncommon for people to be consuming other substances. So that is an additional variable to consider when thinking about nightlife safety. And then in terms of, people's entourages, in terms of musicians, I think there are specific power dynamics at play in live music venues that it's important to bring awareness to and how that might inform or potentially perpetuate sexualized violence in those spaces.
Can you explain a little bit more about why that is? I mean, what makes it like that?
Sure. So an example might be, like let's say there's a green room at a live music venue, and there can be power dynamics that exist between like a musician and a fan, or the opening act and the headliner that might There might be a little bit of pressure or coercion where someone feels like they can't say no to someone in a position of power.
So how did you evolve to really take on this particular issue? Is it through personal experience or something that you've observed?
It was definitely through personal experience. I found myself frustrated that I was experiencing sexual harassment and sexual violence on nights out, and especially when I would experience it and witness my friends also experiencing it. I had a specific night out in San Francisco. I had a girlfriend visiting, and she and I went out to see our favorite DJ. We were really excited about it. She and I became friends because of this DJ, and it was this bizarre night where she and I just experienced relentless sexual harassment to the point where we felt so uncomfortable that we chose to leave, even though neither of us were too inebriated. It's not like we were having a bad time. We just felt uncomfortable. And it was a devastating experience to not only leave music that you love, but also to worry that this was my friend's experience of San Francisco nightlife. I didn't want that to be her impression of San Francisco nightlife, but I felt like there were very little resources or infrastructure or tools to address what we had experienced. So I started doing research and I came across Good Night Out and noticed all of the resources that they had to offer to make venues safer. And so I reached out to the DJ, I reached out to the venue to offer these resources, and I wrote a blog about my experience of addressing this issue. And then that connected me. I guess I used the right hashtags and tagged the right people, and it came across Stacey Forster of Good Night Out Vancouver's inbox, I think, and she and I connected, and then I found myself very interested in learning about Good Night Out's model because I think it's the golden standard what they do.
Mhm.
I think they have 8 years of evaluated educational material, and I knew that I wanted to bring something to San Francisco.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, not to get too personal, but was the interaction you and your friend experienced was it from the DJ or was it from the staff or was it just patrons?
No, it was patrons.
Oh, so it was the patrons that made you aware of the need for this.
Yeah.
And so you enrolled the DJ, what, to become an ambassador or a spokesperson or somebody who might help you with your cause?
So I reached out to the DJ just to let them know that we had had this experience and that we were disappointed that like we had to leave their show and in the hope that they might reconsider playing there in the future until the issue had been addressed. And his assistant actually reached out to us and they advocated on our behalf with the venue because the venue never followed up with us.
Oh, wow. Do you get that experience a lot where you're trying to talk
Yes.
about this issue and you're not getting the kind of response that you would like?
Yeah, I have found it particularly challenging to engage with venues. I think this is for a variety of reasons. I think one of them is the language and the messaging. I think that because sexual violence is so stigmatized, I have found that I have to choose my words very carefully, and I can't use the words that I would like to use, like maybe rape culture or sexual violence um, to talk about this issue. In fact, the Night's Watch has rebranded to Nightlife Advocacy to try and address this because it's a bit broader. It's a little bit easier to digest for people. And I think the reason that that is that understandably, I think people that work in venues, that own festivals, they're very aware of optics. And my experience and the reaction I've gotten is that they're worried that by having messaging like this in their venue, it indicates that they are part of the problem and that they are responsible for the problem, instead of indicating that they are an ally to people like me, to people like my friend, to other people that have experienced sexual violence in these spaces, because that's our goal, is to have venues have infrastructure that indicates that they're an ally, that there are resources available if people are made to feel uncomfortable in those spaces. And then I think the other issue that I've noticed is incentivization. Um, I understand that venues are very aware of their bottom line and about revenue, especially post-pandemic. And I don't have a way, there's no statistics, at least to my knowledge, that demonstrate that a program like the Night's Watch or a program like Good Night Out positively impact revenue. And so there's very little incentive to participate in a program like this.
You know, you raised a couple of points that I want to discuss with you. I think one of them is clearly the economic aspect. And, you know, we used to get this when we tried to promote responsible beverage service training because there was always that attitude, well, I don't want to train my servers if they're going to start cutting off service because that could interfere with our sales. And then the bartenders or the servers said, I don't want to cut people off because I'll lose my tips, you know. So we always had to reframe this as, and this is also true with a lot of other things in our society, whether it be people who are vegetarian or vegan or people who are don't drink alcohol. You know, we always try to educate the owners that there's a what we call a veto vote. That when you get a group of 3 or 4 or 5 people, if you have somebody who's a vegetarian, then everybody decides to go to a restaurant where that person can get a vegetarian meal. And what you were saying before about yourself and where you and your friend, if you're part of a group, you didn't feel comfortable, and so you left, you know. And so they're not only losing you, who may have been the one who was harassed, but they're losing all your friends. And so that has an economic impact. So you know, I think that's what I've seen in terms of trying to frame it. But you brought up the term sexual violence, and I talked about that in different situations. But we learned that term in Cancun when we worked there, and they call it gender violence. And like you, that term violence seems to uh, create a negative response because people don't want to be accused of that, and it's very difficult to define it. So Stacy yesterday described it more or less like climbing a ladder. You know, you kind of got natural flirtation in nightlife venues, which is all part of the kind of sexuality of the experience of dancing and music and meeting people and trying to get relationships. So then you transition from flirting to kind of more or less leering or staring or, you know, the types of external indications. And then you move into actual physical touch and harassment, and then eventually some type of assault, and especially with spiking or other types of things. So how do you navigate when you're talking to bars where they're saying, hey, look, it's just the way people interact with each other. If they're out to have a sexual relationship, they're naturally going to be doing things that might be construed as sexually aggressive, but from their perspective, it's just the way that people meet.
Right. So in terms of addressing that, I think that part of Good Night Out's curriculum, for example, focuses on the ways that sexual violence has been normalized in these spaces. And so I think part of it is that attitude of, oh, that's just the way that it is. Oh, what was she wearing? Oh, how much had they been drinking? It's an attitude that normalizes problematic behavior. And so in terms of addressing that, part of the curriculum also involves bystander intervention. So it's educating people to look out for how might you recognize if someone looks uncomfortable in an interaction, and also challenging that narrative by advocating for having consent be part of your foundation. So if you want to climb that ladder, you certainly can if you navigate it from a place of consent. And with Good Night Out's curriculum, they describe consent not as a moment or a transaction, but as a way of being with each other. So it's active and mutual and ongoing, making sure that the other person is reciprocating your interests in a way that is active, in a way that makes them feel comfortable and enthusiastic about the interaction. So it's certainly not saying, oh, don't come to our bar, like don't try and meet people at our bar, but how can we challenge the narrative that, oh, this is just a place where, like, bars and nightclubs are a place where harassment happens.
So rather than reinforcing what would be perceived as a norm, you're trying to create a new norm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Trying to transform the norm, trying to challenge the narrative.
Yeah, no, the whole kind of roofing and all kinds of use of drugs has been around for as long as I know, but more recently the term spiking has come about, and I think that evolved from the UK, where they transitioned from the pill form of um, drug drug facilitated sexual assault is the way that Stacy presented it, which is a new term to me. I'd never heard that term before. But spiking and then the move to needles versus pills to spike somebody. And I saw on your website you have listed the various California laws that have been put into place, which try to, in a way, kind of normalize this approach against this type of behavior and to uh, incentivize businesses through the law to be much more aware and more conscious and much more engaged with their staff and their patrons. So how do you feel these new legislations? I know they're just some of them I think are just taking effect this as of January, right? So how do you see these laws affecting the work that you do, and how do you think it'll help motivate people more to get more involved?
So I think the value in these laws is that they are opening the door for people to have these conversations that they might not have otherwise had, because it's essentially forcing them through the law to be aware of it. And I have a feeling that this is going to be the right avenue in for the Night's Watch to provide additional infrastructure and support beyond what is legally required from these laws. It's certain, some of the solutions from the laws are drink spike test kits and lids, which don't actually address the problem. So it's like, how do we address the culture that is leading to drug facilitated sexual assault, that is leading to drink spiking in the first place, rather than waiting for a crime to be committed to address behavior that makes people feel uncomfortable. And in fact, the language in these bills, I believe, the test kits have to test for a series of controlled substances, but alcohol is actually the most commonly used drug in drug facilitated sexual assault.
Mm.
So it's bringing awareness that there are inherent risks to serving alcohol, to consuming alcohol. There's also benefits to consuming alcohol. You can feel good consuming alcohol, but there are inherent risks. So how do you build infrastructure that supports, that prevents some of the risks that come with serving alcohol?
The experience of women, and that's your focus, is always the other part of sexual violence, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and that's the man. And we're only talking about kind of we could go into the LGBT community, the gay community, and everything else, because, like I said, back in the 70s, I was involved in nightclubs, and DJ music started in the gay clubs. So spent a lot of time in gay clubs, and there was as much kind of potential harassment in a male gay club than you would see between a man and a woman. But in the recent news, you see X, which really has gone to the real deep end of taking away the monitoring of terms and expressions. And now you have Facebook kind of opening up the floodgates for that same kind of toxic masculinity to become more ingrained in the culture. And I know one of the first things after the election relative to the abortion debate and our bodies, our choice, there was that meme that came out, your body is my choice. The kind of this masculinity that seems to be permeating more so. Um, how do you think this in turn is going to influence the work that you do?
So I think that toxic masculinity, to be honest, is nothing new. I think that a platform like X kind of removing or modifying its infrastructure in a way that maybe allows that kind of masculinity to exist unchecked. It's unfortunate, but it's nothing new. And I think that it is something that we have all been socialized with, including myself. I think that it is important in this work to give people, everyone who has been socialized by this toxic masculinity, the opportunity to change their mind about how they approach and view situations, like once they learn new information, maybe once they learn new information that they might receive from a workshop from the Night's Watch or from Good Night Out. It's important to give people the opportunity to acknowledge and transform some of the ideas that we have all been socialized with. I think with a platform like X modifying its infrastructure, I think it will be, it certainly presents more opportunity for danger. But to me, it's still nothing new.
You're in a room and you're doing a training and you have men and women, and you're trying to persuade or suggest or introduce new ways of a new paradigm of looking at this issue. Do you find sometimes that women in the group are comfortable speaking out about their personal experiences, or do you find that men in the group really just have a hard time understanding it? And do you think that the dialogue between the women that they work with and the men that they work with that you're generating may make it more comfortable for women to speak out about their personal experiences, to educate the men that they work with, and men being more open and willing to understand what's going on from a woman's perspective?
I think that the way that the workshops are designed is, I think it creates an important opportunity for reflection on everyone's part, and it's an opportunity for people that have experienced sexualized violence, not just women. I think that with our program, like the idea is to make sure that it encompasses everyone that experiences sexual violence. It's women, it's primarily people who are marginalized, women of color, trans people. And the workshops offer an opportunity for men to reflect on the toxic masculinity that they've been socialized with, maybe ways that they have participated in it. And I think it also offers an opportunity for solidarity, for people who have experienced sexualized violence to express that, and um, to identify ways that we can work together to create this new paradigm.
Okay, we're getting close to the end here, and I'd just like you to think in terms of if you're going to be presenting, um, give me a statement that would basically state what you hope to have people learn when you present in Sacramento, considering you could have some key influences within cities that could, gain access to the venues that you're trying to reach. And there'll be several people there from San Francisco, obviously, who have that. Maggie from the Entertainment Commission and Ben from the office, and I'm sure you've been in touch with them. But in saying, if you come to this workshop knowing that some of these people may already be familiar with some of these issues, what would you say is the greatest accomplishment that you could see achieving in the next 5 years as it relates to nightlife and awareness around these issues?
So I think that with San Francisco specifically, I think that there is a narrative right now that is perpetuated by the media that San Francisco is dead in terms of entertainment and nightlife, and that it is an unsafe place. And the newly elected mayor, Daniel Lurie, he ran on a campaign that prioritized public safety and public health. And I think that the Night's Watch can fit into that vision and can help transform the narrative that San Francisco is an unsafe place, and that it can positively impact its reputation as a nightlife destination, and which would generate revenue by attracting more tourists. I hope that people that attend, I hope that they're inspired to do more than what is legally required of them by these laws, and that they are compelled to build gender-based violence prevention initiatives into their nighttime economy infrastructure, especially in ways that incentivize programs to participate? So can they create grants for bars and for nightclubs, where if they take a workshop with the Night's Watch, if they take a workshop with Good Night Out, is there some kind of grant they can get for making their place safer? I hope that they walk away with awareness that sexual violence is pervasive and that it is a spectrum of behaviors beyond the crimes that are listed in the bills, but beyond drink spiking, beyond sexual assault, and that it is not worth waiting for a crime to be committed to address behavior that makes someone feel uncomfortable. And I hope that people see this as an opportunity and that they see the value in shifting from a reactive approach to a proactive approach, because it is much more efficient and it is much easier to prevent than it is to respond to the fallout from an incident that occurs in your space.
Great. That was a good summation. Well, thank you for being here today, Elizabeth. I wish you good luck in your work, and it's exciting to hear what you're doing, and you clearly bring a passion to this. I think that comes through, and I think that's half the battle of convincing people, is that you have to be somebody that seems to be convincing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, all right.